So I'm going to be talking to you today about building community with equity and care. And it's something I've been working on this whole year, but I've also been working on it before this whole year. It's just that this year everybody started to listen to me, which is interesting. And by the way, Ramadan Kareem to anyone else who's practicing. And this is the dog picture that I made just for you guys. This is a new dog picture that I added to my slides today. And I've got like a Ramadan themed slide deck for you that my daughter helped create as well. Before I start, I just wanted to say Jasmine Roberts of OSU gave a keynote at OER Domains just in April. And the way she did the land acknowledgement was so authentic that I felt like even if I'm visiting, I would want to do something like this. I know you've had a land acknowledgement this morning that was really good by Diane. So I won't repeat Jasmine's territory acknowledgement, but I am going to just remind us that coloniality survives colonialism, and it's maintained alive in books and criteria for academic performance, in cultural patterns, common sense, self-image of peoples, in aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of our modern experience. And we all breathe coloniality all the time and every day. So as we talk about care and equity, I think it's really important to recognize that this is not just a historical thing, but it still continues to this day. And these systemic issues are not ones that we can solve immediately in our classrooms, but we can hopefully work collectively to address them in whatever ways we can. So my plan for today, we've just checked in. I'm going to do a chatterfall, and there's over 200 people, so hopefully you'll participate, as many of you as possible, in that. And then I'm going to talk about equity and care and show you something new, which is a Rumi cheese analogy. You'll know what that is when we get there. And then I'll talk about some practical tips for building community online with intentionally equitable hospitality. And if you have a piece of paper and pen or pencil nearby, we're going to do a reflective activity where you take your eyes away from your screen for a minute and think about takeaways from this entire conference and not just this keynote. So the slides are open for commenting over here. Hey, Jim Stoffer from Canada. Hello, Jim. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat randomly at this point, but later I'll be more intentional about what I'm reading off the chat. All right, and I also always want to acknowledge that the keynote appears like the work of one person, but it's really inspired by many people, and I try as much as possible to attribute different people as I go along with where I got ideas from. And so Chatterfall is just, I'm asking you a question and I'm asking you all to respond in the chat, okay? So the first question is, what gives you energy these days? Walking outside, the sun, gardening. I've heard this thing about the outdoors and exercise being a huge thing. Fruit tree, dog, pets for sure. A lot of people got pets. Opportunities to make the world better, encouraging others. Gardening is coming up a lot. Meditation, swimming, food and nature, listening to birds singing, coffee, yes, taking breaks, cats, and the hopes of getting back together. I think hope helps give energy as well. Reflection, playing team sports, flowers. I love flowers too. Kids and grandkids. And cuddles for sure. The worst thing was when I had COVID and I couldn't cuddle with my child for 10 days. It was so hard. And cuddling has never been the same, you know, as it used to be before. Zoom goofiness with your grandparents. That's so cute. And napping. Oh my God, I wish I could nap. I'm so bad at this. I can't nap in the middle of the day. And long talks with the people in your life. Yeah. Walking children from and to school. Reading scripture for sure. Yeah. That's inspired me. There's a slide where reading scripture has helped something in a slide. I'll tell you what it is when we get there. Music, food, and not being on Zoom sometimes. Yeah, new recipes. Okay, the not being on Zoom is really popular. Okay. I felt this semester has been one of the lowest energy starts to a semester, even though we've had ups and downs. But what I've felt like in my classes, I have to do like shorter activities and switch things up all the time to maintain my own energy and my students' energy, especially when I had COVID and then at the time of recovering from COVID took a while. And so the energy was something that was really difficult. But I think we're also kind of fatigued by a year of pandemic and online learning, right? What's an important thing you learned or achieved in this past year? Parenting, not the online school part. Patience, yes. Flexibility, being patient, resilience, awareness, gratitude, yes. Had a baby, oh my God, that's a big deal. Perseverance, long distance running, I think someone said. Importance of staying positive, self-care, family and freedom, kindness, mindfulness. Okay with being good enough, yes, don't sweat the small stuff. Finding boundaries between work and life. Oh, Sean, let us know how you did that. That's the hardest thing. Food is medicine. Yeah, slowing down is okay for sure. Caring for learners online. That's one that was a big one for me as well. How to be alone and happy. I'm an only child, so I'm generally okay with being alone, but I'm also a big, big extrovert, so that's hard. Giving yourself and others some grace. I think that one is huge, Alexis. Thank you for mentioning that. Life is short. Yes. Scott, it's okay to not be okay. That's really important too. Just let yourself grieve sometimes, right? Completed your doctorate, Dawn, congratulations. That's like a big deal. I finished my PhD in the middle of my country being in revolution, and my daughter was a toddler at the time. So I felt like that's a big achievement, finishing a PhD during a pandemic. That's huge. Congratulations. Beauty of nature, for sure. I think I appreciate nature much more than usual. And I live in the city, so nature is not like immediate in the way that some people have it. I don't know what it's like in Ohio, actually. Learning to ask for help, that's really big too. I think that's important. Setting up a gym in your basement, that's awesome. This feels like a huge achievement and hopefully helpful beyond the pandemic as well. How much written correspondence can touch people? Yes. Doing religious ritual online. Yes, hard work. There's a lot of things I think we didn't imagine we could do online, but there are ways if we try hard enough. All right. So for me, one of the biggest achievements I've had this semester, this year, and of course, you know, as a faculty developer myself, I did a lot of work this year, more than I've worked maybe in the past, I don't know, 10 years of my life. But this Sorry, I got disconnected for a minute. Can you guys see me and hear me now? Are we okay now? Yeah.
We're good.
Okay, great. So I was saying, as a faculty developer, I've done a lot in the past year, but I think the biggest achievement was this one, which I community building resources that I co-created with some folks, because I felt like, you know, a lot of people were teaching online for the first time, and there weren't enough faculty developers to go around the world. Thanks for loving the chat. It's gonna keep going for a while today, hopefully. Thank you all for participating. Just make sure you're sending to everyone. Oh, you love the Chelsea. You've seen it. Awesome. That's great. So I'll talk more about these community building resources because they've grown so much that they're kind of difficult to navigate now. So I talk about them in my keynotes to help people find stuff on them, you know? Oh, a month-long exploration. I should do that at my institution, Jim. I hadn't thought of doing that. I should do it. All right. What's an unexpected thing that brought you peace or joy recently, or even today at the conference? Thank you, card. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about like getting physical cards. Faith, getting vaccinated. Congratulations. Yes. Morning walks, community of instructors. Yes, that's so important, like caring for each other, right? Students doing well on things, working from home, flowers. Flowers and gardens are coming up in nature, new books, bird feeder, warm weather, saving a bee. Wow. Taking a moment to absorb all the sessions today. Something about children, space, children again. Yeah, realizing how much the educational communities, yeah, I think so too. Being connected is great. Working with colleagues who are so passionate and never give up, and getting vaccinated as well. Then, oh, I'm sorry you had to do that. Xanax is nice though. I'm sorry that you had to need it though. Without shooting me as your favorite parent today, Jason. That's amazing. Getting grades in. Oh yeah, don't remind me. I still have a couple more weeks of classes to go. I hate grading. I wish I could just give everyone a pass and not have to worry about this. I wish institutions didn't have to put us through this. Picking your favorite wine from winery in person, meeting a friend for a walk, new love interest is visiting. All right, that's awesome. That's really exciting, Leo. I hate grading too. Yeah, I think everyone hates grading. Does anyone like grading? Okay. That's ungrading, exactly. Ungrading is there because we really don't like doing this more than anything, you know. But we don't like it. That means there's something wrong with it, probably, you know. But anyway. Oh yeah, Josh Eiler. I know. I've seen the slides, and I've actually watched it too. Talking about grief. Yes, that was a great session. You teach for free, they pay me to grade. Yes, Lindsay, I kind of feel that way too. Yeah. This chat, awesome. Thank you, Bridget. Okay, so what was a big thing for me is my daughter and I started gratitude journaling this year. And it was just a way to go through the pandemic. And when I was COVID positive and we had to stay away from each other, she still had 3 or 4 things to be positive about every day in her gratitude journaling. So that was really lovely. That I think it helped ground her and give her something good to think about despite everything else that was going on. And I've been encouraging my students to do gratitude journaling. And at the beginning, they were a bit skeptical about it. And then they started to find benefit in it. So if anyone else is doing that, I'd love to hear about that practice. And so we actually have a conversation in the community building resources about gratitude journaling with all these different ways that different people do it and different resources. So if you're interested in trying that with your children or with your students or with yourself, it's a lovely practice. And it's not one of those toxic positivity things. It's not to say that don't take time to grieve and don't take time to feel like there's something wrong in the world, but also look for the little things that can make you happy. And it really makes a difference to people's moods, I think. So I'm going to start talking about equity and equality, and I just want to keep time to make sure I don't go over time, and I give you time to ask questions at the end. You've probably seen an image similar to this one before with people looking at a baseball field, but because in Egypt we don't play baseball, so nobody really recognizes what the heck people are looking at and why they're trying to look at it. So I like this one with a fruits analogy, fruit metaphor, because it's a little bit easier for people to relate to in different parts of the world. And what I've been doing with this apples, yeah, I like apples. And when I'm looking at it, one of the things other than the equity equality thing, which probably is very familiar to people, what I notice is that the person in the middle is jumping and still trying to reach the apple. So even though they're not easily reaching it, they can still try. But the yellow one is just sitting there, not even trying. It's so far away that they can't even try. And obviously, everyone who has children, everyone who really knows their students knows that it's not the same thing that's going to help everyone, right? But this image isn't enough for me. So I've been editing it over the past few years. And the first thing is not everyone wants an apple, right? Maybe someone wants an orange. And of course, oranges don't grow on apple trees, but just the concept of us as teachers or as institutions deciding for students what their end goal should be and only helping them achieve the goals that we find valuable is problematic. We need to recognize that some of them maybe want something different than what we're offering. What do you mean, Jim? Constantly estimated how many people still don't think this is something to bother with. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, and then the other thing is, other than what they want, there may be hidden types of needs and interests that students have. So this taller person who is maybe the most privileged, appearing to be the most privileged, maybe they have a mental health challenge, or maybe they've just had something really emotionally devastating happen in their lives. And maybe they need care. And my daughter's seen these slides so many times that she can read them out in her sleep. But the other day she said, an apple won't satisfy their appetite for love. And so I really like that. And that she used the word appetite for love as well. So I thought that was important to keep in mind that, marginality can be visible and invisible. Things like class background and sexuality and chronic or temporary disabilities. When you're communicating online, you may not be able to see them as easily as you would in a face-to-face situation. What else would you change about that diagram? Is there anything else you'd change? Because I've been editing it and I'd be happy to keep editing it. I'll pause for a second and take a sip of my ginger cinnamon tea. Oh yeah, equity and equality and color blindness. I'm amazed that people still say things like that, to be honest. Like even if they think it, they don't realize they shouldn't be saying it. They should reflect a little bit more. Treating everyone the same forces the person to conform to your ways. Yes, to the dominant ways, whatever they do. How about people who don't have access to the tree? That's a great point. What if someone's completely outside and very far away? What do we do to bring the tree to them? Do we take the fruit out and give it to them? What do you think we should do? Blind to color, blind to racism. I agree, Leo. Yes, I love that one. I don't know how to say your name. Deanna Palmer? Yes, the one about different animals and all being asked to climb a tree, whether they're a monkey or an elephant or a fish, right? Scott, financial and technical limitation. Speculative realism could be added, not just seeing things from the human perspective. Michelle, I'd love to hear more about that. I have no idea what that means. I know what speculative and I know what realism is, but I don't know what you're trying to say. Collaborative apple picking. I love that. Some of my students say, why don't they collaborate and help each other? I like that, giving them the chance to do that. All these people are able-bodied, yeah, and they look probably male. I agree. They're all able-bodied. How do you know you want the apple if you've never seen an apple before? For sure. And Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie says, like in Nigeria, where she grew up, they had mangoes. They didn't have apples for the most part. And so that's an important thing. If you've never seen it, how do you know you want it? How do you know you should reach for it, right? A lot of, I guess, first generation college students may not realize what the important things to do in college are, like making relationships and building your social capital versus just going to class. Ground is uneven instead of people's heights. It's not a problem with the people. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. Okay. Reminds us of the power of qualitative studies. Okay. All right. I am going. Thank you all so much for engaging with this idea. And I still think that image is kind of static. And Jasmine, I did not mean to put you on my slides so often. This one's been on a lot of my slides recently. And she was saying, if you care about equity, you realize there are no shortcuts. It's a lifelong commitment, right? And Sun, who is a student at Kean University, talks about how if you care about equity, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And that's a huge thing to realize. It's not that you're going to fix the problem and then you're going to turn your back and go away and it's going to be fine. It's not. You need to keep looking. There will be new students who have different needs, right? I also like this response from Rebecca Sellers. And this was a tweet about if you care about equity, what do you do, right? And she was saying, if there's systemic inequality, you need to not only open the doors, but just throw them off their hinges, because when you open a door, someone else might close it. So you want to just unhinge it completely, remove it completely. And someone told me recently, even then, some doors don't fit, right? Not everyone fits through a door. You don't think about people in wheelchairs, or my dad was very overweight, that some doors were tighter for him. And, thinking about all these different ways that just removing a door might not even be enough. So that was an eye-opener for me, like just thinking about that. Okay, and then this Rumi cheese analogy is one that I'm still in the process of developing, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And I will ask you to contribute your own ideas for it, because I think it's a flexible model. Okay, so has anyone heard about this Ian McKay Swiss cheese analogy about preventing spread of infection? So here's what it looks like. I'm going to describe it in case it's not easy for everyone to see. Basically, what he says is Swiss cheese has holes in it. And so if you slice it up, different slices will have holes in different places. So if you think about the COVID virus, or any virus really, and each of these slices is like one of the measures of protection, but it's not foolproof. It's not 100%. And every hole is a hole through which the virus can come through. So vaccines, maybe some of them are like 90% effective, 60% effective, whatever. So some virus might still come through. But there are other things like quarantine and things like masks and avoiding touching your face and hygiene, right? So these are all different ways, and some of them are personal responsibilities and some of them are shared responsibilities. The more layers you apply, the more likely you are to protect yourself. And it's still not 100% foolproof, right? And we know this, right? A lot of people who wear masks all the time and do distancing and everything have still gotten COVID. But obviously, you're more likely to get it if you don't, right? So my idea was to use an Egyptian cheese called Rumi cheese, which looks a lot like Swiss cheese, but smaller holes. And it also has black peppercorns. And I'm going to tell you what the peppercorns are for in a minute. And instead of a virus, I'm looking at diverse causes of inequity and need for care. And what are some of the things that your students face that are barriers or oppressions? Thanks. All right, so what are some of the barriers and oppressions that your students face, especially at OSU? I think a lot of you are from Ohio. Right, lack of access to internet, definitely, that one comes up. Hearing impairments for sure, technology gap, access to devices, not just internet, right? Learning differences, yes. ADHD, for sure. Mental health, multiple jobs, anxiety, yes, lack of quiet spaces to learn, difference in preparation, neurodivergence, for sure, and caring for family and caregiving responsibilities, yeah, having to take care of kids. So lots of these are coming like similar ones in a row. Hunger, that's huge, right? Student parents, having to contact multiple services, campus culture, Intimate partner violence, that's huge. Food insecurity, first generation. All right. Transportation, limited life experiences, bias, police violence. Yes. Yes. And so you can see that these are different people facing different oppressions and different barriers to learning. Some of them are really huge, and some of them are probably easier to deal with. Missing contact with people, for sure. Yeah. All right. So we have these. And so once we know what kind of inequalities our students are facing, we can start trying to address them, right? So for example, culturally relevant pedagogy, if you can see, and now it's getting a little bit, I know, crowded over here. Culturally relevant pedagogy as a strategy would work a little bit to address something like racism, right? And xenophobia. But there are other things like classism, heteropatriarchy, ableism, neuronormativity, whatever, and all of the ones that you've said, like we can work at whatever level of granularity, right? Because I don't know if culturally relevant pedagogy is going to solve the problem of police violence. It's too systemic for that, right? But it might help a little bit, at least help people feel seen and that their culture is appreciated. Now, think about what are some pedagogical strategies that help promote equity, but they won't promote equity for everyone. So culturally relevant pedagogy is probably going to work well for race and xenophobia and things like that, but they don't necessarily address neurodivergence, and they don't necessarily address people who are blind or deaf, right? And keep in mind, by the way, the black peppercorns in this Rumi cheese, my daughter doesn't like them when they come up to her because they're a bit spicy, right? So sometimes something that's a solution for some people might actually be a little bit harmful or disturbing for other people. And that's just something that we need to realize, is that not every solution that works for one group will work for everyone. So what other practices or strategies would enable us to have better equity? So think about the things that you mentioned already that were barriers for your students to learn as comfortably as you'd like, and what strategies help. So multiple formats for different abilities and styles, yes. So that's kind of like universal design for learning, if you've heard of that term. Some solution cause, yeah. Really effective personal tutoring, for sure. That can work for a lot of cases. Flexible deadlines and assignments, that's one that works, I think, for a lot of people as well. Although I have a class this semester where students want more structure than flexibility, which is very shocking to me, but apparently that works for some people. So I give them a soft deadline and I say, if you want a deadline, use it. If the deadline makes you anxious, don't use it, you know? Yes. Tech access for all. Asking students what they need. Thank you, Chelsea. Yes, ask them. Ask them. They can tell you what they need explicitly. Yes. Multiple ways and formats for sure. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's a good one, Allison. Yeah. The black pepper for instructors and TAs is flexible deadlines, more work for us. That's for sure. Yeah. Considering UDL for learning space design. Yes. Too much choice can do a lot of cognitive load. Yes, that's true. That is true. You have a point with that. Yeah. All right. So I've just come up with a list of these things, but like I have universal design for learning, and then, you know, things like learner agency and trauma-informed pedagogy and just building community online. And I want to note the one about institutional policies, because there's a lot of things we can do in our classes, but if the institutional policies aren't supporting us, it becomes really difficult to care and be equitable. Sometimes the institutional policies work against us. And I think I have a quote from Bell Hooks about this in a minute. But yeah. So the thing is that care and equity need to work together most of the time. Nell Nodding says, in the caring approach, you want to advise, do unto others as they would have done unto them. Not as you'd have done unto you, but as they would have done unto them. And this goes to what, I think it was Chelsea who was saying, listen to students. Do to students what they want to be done to them. Ask them what they want. And this is why this thing of my students who didn't want this too much flexibility thing, I gave them a soft deadline. But then there was a few others who didn't want the deadline. So I was like, it's a soft deadline. It's okay if you miss it, you know, but give them what they, listen to them and understand why some things bother them, or, you know, what they want, like things like cameras and wanting to have their cameras off. Listen to them about why before you start complaining about, I want to see their face, right? My students always have good reasons for why they're doing things in certain ways. And we can have a conversation about it. And most of the time I'll do what they've asked in the first place. Platinum rule. I did not know that. Primrose, is this something that's called, or do you just call it that right now? I like the platinum rule. All right. And then Nancy Fraser, who writes about social justice, talks about the importance of parity of participation. Can we bring students to the table as equal partners to influence decision-making? Do the students who are farthest from justice, the most marginalized, have an equal voice and in setting the rules and not just coming to a place that's already been decided and just making small tweaks, you know. And so there's a notion called intentionally equitable hospitality. Primrose, I know you can't speak, but is it your term, platinum rule, or is it something that someone else has invented? I just want to know about that. And maybe towards the end, I don't know if they can make you a panelist to be able to speak later. Some of my colleagues and I came up with this notion of intentionally equitable hospitality. If you've never heard about it before, it's because we just made it up a couple of years ago. And the notion, when applied to the teaching environment, is thinking about yourself as a teacher, as a host building a space, and that hospitality is your responsibility. And you have the power. Oh, someone is talking.
Yes, they unmuted me, Maha. This is Primrose. I came across that platinum rule in one of my numerous readings, but it's basically what you said. The golden rule is do unto others as they would have done to, as you would, whatever. But the platinum rule is focusing on the them and not on you.
I like it. Thank you. I just clicked the link in the chat. Thank you. I like that. Now I know that it's not just Nell Noddings who said that then. Great. Thank you. Whoops. All right. So intentionally equitable hospitality is like that as well. Like, who do you involve and listen to as you create the space? So don't just imagine and empathize with what you imagine your students would be, but do you give your students space to actually reorder the thing? And that's why I have these images of blocks, because you can give building blocks and let them bring their own building blocks and put them in whatever order they want, right? And how do you make each person feel welcome? It's not an easy thing to just say everyone's welcome. It's much harder to actually make it in practice. And setting the intention and walking the talk is not easy, and you need to keep checking that what you've done works, because it may not, even when you're well-intentioned. And then, of course, the equity one is one we talked about, and it's not enough to say, oh, I care about all my students, but you want to be able to care about each student. Obviously, if you have a huge number of students, this needs to be distributed somehow so that you're not the only person caring for like 1,000 people, right? Mia Zamora and I built something called the Equity Care Matrix, which again talks about equity and care and how they work together. We started by asking on Twitter to people, what is equity without care and what's care without equity? And I'm going to talk about that in a second, but talking again about different levels of showing care and equity and where we can do it on our personal practice, like in the way we design our classes and plan them and the course philosophy, but also what kind of habitual practices in class and how much agency we give students to say what they want to do next and how they feel about what we're doing. And the way we respond in situations, which is something I guess nobody can teach you how to do, but you learn to do it. And of course, in our one-on-one interactions with some students. And then on a systemic level, how much can we advocate for caring and equitable policies institutionally? This is something that we do on a regular basis. As a faculty developer, I have a lot of openings to do that, but other faculty can do it too, right? And then other than that, we can still support others and form allyships within our institutions with people who have similar values. And then sometimes it's a random situation, but you have an opportunity to speak up against a practice that's oppressive. And sometimes, you have a precarious job and you can't speak up in public, but you can support someone in private, which happens to me a lot. Like I'll speak up against something in Senate and a few people will support me publicly. And then a lot of people will send me private messages thanking me, but they couldn't speak up at the moment, right? So just recognizing that a lot of us who care might be at odds with environments wherein we teach, whether it's our department or institution or the country or whatever. Toronto talks about how we can organize society so that we're not always in competition with one another. And I think we need to think about ways of doing this in universities as well, so that students are not in competition with each other or with faculty, and the faculty are not in competition with each other. And I have a quick story to share. You see this Power Hub over here? I take my daughter to school in the mornings on days when they don't have COVID cases in her school. And I go somewhere to sit where near her school where there aren't a lot of power outlets. And I usually get there very early in the morning. And so I always get the best place. And I realize a lot of people come after me and they can't find a power outlet. So I started to take this Power Hub with me. And what it's done is, like, even though there's only this scarcity of power outlets, I'm able to share with others and I don't lose anything because I still get to put my stuff in there. But there's also room for other people to have electricity now. And it was also a way for me to get to know people. And for the most part, it's been like people now know me. And so they just come and they plug them in and just say hi. They don't have to ask permission every time. And for the most part, it's really good, except occasionally someone will sit too close by and then I have to put my mask on and then it's not very comfortable. But for the most part, sharing power that we have is thinking about how you can, share resources instead of being in competition for resources when you have the privilege of being there first. So I feel like this was a way of using my privilege. I wasn't going to give up my privilege, honestly, because I needed the electricity to work, right? But I was still able to make sure that other people weren't losing because of my privilege as much as I could do. So, and I'm curious, how might institutions promote equity and care, you think, to reduce competition? What are some of the things, whether OSU or your institution does it, or things that you imagine could be done to help produce less competition, whether between faculty or between students or between faculty and students? Ungrading for sure. I know that was an autocorrect, upgrading instead of ungrading. OER and free textbooks, yes. Dropping the crime, ungrading. Okay, it looks like someone was talking about ungrading today, because that's something like a lot of people it's on a lot of people's minds. I think I agree with that. Grant RFPs for collaboration, yes. Reimagining what constitutes tenure and promotion, for sure. And recognizing that those criteria are quite colonial, I think, in the way they were set up, and to exclude particular people. Give benefits to employees, yes, for sure, whether full-time or adjunct, yes. Free technology Wi-Fi, yes. Moving away from enrollment-based budgets, yes. Flatten hierarchies between faculty, adjuncts, and staff, for sure. Put yourself in the learner's shoes, yes. I don't know if you can put yourself in the learner's shoes as an institution, but definitely people in institutions as they make decisions need to do that. And listen to students again, like we're saying. Increase student worker minimum wage, yes, because student workers are so exploited, right? So yes, so some of these things that I have here and more, you guys have said a lot more as well. Oh, and speaking of which, I also think, the no grading or thing like pass, no pass. And for me also proctoring, I know that there's been work done at OSU to help you imagine ways of doing assessment that do not require proctoring. And I don't know if you know or not, but one of the softwares that does proctoring, Proctorio, is suing an instructional technologist or instructional designer, Ian Linkletter, for speaking up against them by showing videos that they made themselves, like videos from the company itself. So if you'd like to support him in his lawsuit, this is a link to that. It's a really ugly story about how corporate tech companies can be really vicious and violent to people who care about students, right? So what is equity without care and what's care without equity? I want to listen to some of your thoughts before I show you the model, and then I'm going to show you some practices. Jenna was writing earlier about strength and just simply saying and repeating that you mean to build a collaborative versus competitive environment, right? That's true. Except if you're saying it, but there's something you're doing that's not promoting that. So you need to be careful. But I assume that the people who are repeating it are probably being very careful about what they're doing, right? So Lindsay's saying equity without care, I think, needs to be the attitude of treating everyone the same. Oh, right. That's a great point, because you're not careful about what the differences are. So it's like equality, but not equity. Equity without care plus care without equity, they're both ineffective. That's true. Equity without care leads to inequity. Care without equity is noticing but not acting. I love that one. So you're maybe acting on a small scale, but not on a larger scale. I like that, Lynn. Equity without care is impossible, meaning it's not really equity. Yeah, it's almost gaslighting. Wow. I had not thought of that. Jasmine, I'm going to follow up with you on this one. Heidi, I think is how I pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Not paying attention to what is actually needed by your specific students. I agree. Yes. White savior complex, Melissa. I'm not sure which one is the white savior complex. You want to tell me in the chat? And Nick is saying blaming the victim for having inequities. Yes. Versus emphasizing without following up with action. Yes. I like this aspect of blaming the victim. for having inequities. You know, when I first did the Rumi cheese analogy, initially I had the person, and then I changed it into the oppression is the thing that we're trying to fight, not the person, not the issue that the person is having, but the racism that causes the oppression, right? Everybody seems to understand what you mean, Melissa, by white savior complex, but I don't. Like not listening to what people tell you they need to be cared for and imposing your beliefs. Yeah, definitely. That is a huge one, a la colonialism, for sure. Yes. I agree. I've taught my daughter, obviously not a colonialist or someone with power, but I've always taught her to ask, can I help or how can I help, versus assuming that she knows how to help. Because of course, children a lot of times they mean to help, but they mess things up sometimes, and you don't want to make them feel bad for messing things up because they are trying to help. But you want to teach them that when your intention is to help, you need to ask the person in front of you how they want to be helped first. And so here's the matrix that Mia and I came up with. So from people on Twitter, we came up with these ideas of like equity without care could be tokenism, diversity theater, lip service. It could be performance. It could be systemic. So it could be systemic in the sense, at least you have a policy that means everyone should follow it. But then if nobody's enacting it with care, then it's problematic, right? And then I put in an Arabic word there because someone mentioned scripture here, and this came up from, it's an Arabic word meaning when you do something to look good, but you don't do it with your heart. So I think sometimes that's what it is. Like you're doing the behavior that appears equitable. So it's a theater or performance, but deep down inside, you don't understand why you're doing it. You haven't really internalized those values. And then on the other hand, care without equity, and some of you have mentioned this as well. So it could be like selective, right? You're caring about the ones that you see, that you notice, that are visible to you. Could be effective labor, which a lot of us have to do when there isn't enough equity in our institutions. We have to make up for it. Could be ameliorative or a band-aid, like it fixes a problem but doesn't fix it long term, right? And hopefully when we have equity with care, hopefully we do it with parity of participation, and that leads to more social justice. All right, so now I'm going to move to the most practical portion of the day. Hopefully we'll have time to go through these and give you time to reflect on the whole day today. So dimensions of community building centered on care and equity is sort of what we were trying to do with these community building resources on the 1HE site that we did with Equity Unbound. And the idea was so many people are going to be teaching online. They don't know how to do this. There's inequitable faculty and support, development support worldwide. And so we wanted to care for teachers so that they can care for students. And we know that not everyone is able to give and receive care the same way. And online, it's harder. If you weren't already very active online, you probably are struggling to give and receive care online, or you were at some point. Maybe everyone's getting better at it now, right? And so the values underpinning the design is thinking about intentionally equitable hospitality, thinking about who has access to what, whose culture is dominating, who has power, and trying to give these activities with adaptations in the design and helping you think about how to adapt in the moment for care and equity. And so, for example, we have ways of doing introductions in class, safety considerations, warm-ups, setting the tone, and ongoing community building and interaction, right? So I'm curious how you do introductions in your classes. Do you do synchronous ones? Do you do asynchronous ones? We have a lot of examples of synchronous ones, but I think that asynchronous has the value of giving students time to decide what they want to say about themselves and how they want to represent themselves, and then saying it easier is that you can go back and read what your students have written again and remember who they are, because sometimes it's kind of difficult to remember everything about a student, right? But if it's asynchronous, you can go back, and for me, I go back to their blogs and I read what they wrote about themselves. Liv, you were asking about the Arabic word, so I'll write it in English. It would be like riya. It's called riya. Is doing the thing to look good but not meaning it. All right. Dawn is saying you're doing introductions using a discussion board, right? And some people do things like Flipgrid with a video, right? But then there are a lot of activities that are so interesting, like asking people to share a story of their name, but then there's safety considerations. What if someone is trans and they're not comfortable sharing how they reached their name, or someone has changed their name for some safety reason? So it's important to ask these questions to students and give them an out or give them an alternative, like they could share a story of someone else in their family or, and then there's one shared by a Kenyan educator, which is what kind of animal would you be? But apparently in South Africa, post-apartheid South Africa, this is really offensive to do with people. So you need to be careful of the culture that you're working with. And then there was one about give me a tour of where you are. And then what if people aren't willing to share their home or open their cameras, or they have other people with them in the room, or their house is not tidy right now, right? So keeping all these things in mind as we do this. And then there's one called surrealist drawing, which has deeper connotations where you ask people to draw with their non-dominant hand and then analyze that. So the introductory activity can be an inroads into something deeper rather than just getting to know something about a person. And then, we think introduction, a lot of people are talking about asynchronous introduction, so that's good. Warming up is really cool and really important. No, it's not cool because it's warming up, but I mean, it really helps the energy of a class. And because a lot of people are teaching synchronously, and I don't know what your situation is, but it seems like during this pandemic, it's just less of a cognitive load on everyone, even though that's not what online learning used to be, but it seems to be what pandemic online learning is for a lot of people who have enough access to be able to do that. So the checking in of just asking how they're feeling is really important, and showing them that you mean more than you wanting them to say they're fine. So there's a lot of creative ideas of how to do this in this website. And then, giving text-based and visual and oral ways of doing warm-ups. So writing on paper, like spiral journal, which I'm going to do as a cool down at the end of today. And then some things are like kinesthetic, like some theater of the oppressed techniques, like opposites, just getting them moving a little bit can be really energizing. And there are other ideas like doing improv things, which can be text-based or oral. And if you've never seen PowerPoint karaoke, you really need to check it out. It's so much fun. But always think about who you might exclude by making some of these choices. And some things are really, really cool. So I wouldn't want to stop doing a cool thing because someone will be excluded, but I just want to make sure that I'm not always doing the thing that will always exclude that person, right? And always trying to find an alternative. And we've tried to give adaptations for every single thing that's here to imagine different ways of doing it. Like if you don't have breakout rooms, you can do it this way. If you're meeting your students asynchronously, here's another way of doing it, things like that. It's also really important, I think, to set the tone. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of, oh, you did PowerPoint karaoke with your students. That's so cool. Sarah, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad they enjoyed it. My students liked it a lot too. I made them bring their own images as well. I was teaching them about copyright and Creative Commons. So they had to bring in images, and then we did the PowerPoint karaoke on top of that. So it was just a fun thing on top of a more academic pursuit. All right. So annotating the syllabus. Has anyone ever heard of annotating the syllabus? I learned about this one from Rami Kalir of Colorado. This is, we know students don't usually read the syllabus or don't read it closely. And this is not about quizzing them to make sure they've read it, but more about inviting them to say what's interesting for them in the syllabus, what's confusing, what would they like to know more about, things like that. I think it's also important to let students know that we're aware that they're going through trauma. This helps my students a lot. I show them a video by May Samad about this. And I try as much as possible to follow trauma-informed pedagogy in my teaching. And you can get a checklist of that on the website. Gratitude journaling, which I talked about. Third places for me are like semi-synchronous informal places for students to chat with you and with each other, because now they're not going to bump into each other in the hallways. It's cool, right? So you need some other space like WhatsApp or Slack or Discord, or just a space on the LMS even to just talk to each other, ask questions, maybe share memes and jokes and things like that. And maybe you want to co-create your community guidelines with students. If they've never learned online before, maybe you show them ideas and they work together. Donnie, I know you, Donnie, from Twitter, I think. And then the other thing is like surveying students. It's one way of listening to them and making sure you listen to all of them and not just the ones who speak up in class. It's like a pre-survey, getting to know more about them, asking for feedback throughout the semester, maybe going back to the syllabus and annotating it again in the middle of the semester or the end of it, right? And things like alternative grading, I think, set the tone as well, like letting your students know you're not judging them on a curve in competition with each other or things like that. And then the next one, and it's almost the last thing, is liberating structures. Have you ever used liberating structures? Do you know what they are? So I'm going to put a link in the chat, liberating structures.com. If you've never seen these or used them before, they're originally meant for face-to-face, but they also work really well online. But when you read the structure and how it works, these are ways of structuring conversations in ways that are equitable, meant to be equitable, but also unleash creativity and productivity in a very short amount of time. So if you've never done one of these, it's really difficult to imagine how it's going to work. And so that's why we have demo videos of us trying them out in this site. So Conversation Cafe is one that makes sure everyone's voice is heard. I actually just blogged about how these are equitable. So if you check out my blog, you'll read something about me explaining how each one of them does that. Troika Consulting is about 3 people advising each other. And I think it's really nice because it's reciprocal. So each person gets to help the others and also to seek help. And the last one that I really like, it's called Triz. There's a lot more, but I mean, the last one I'm mentioning today is Triz, which helps students solve a problem by trying to go the opposite way and trying to create the worst possible scenario in order to help them reach the best possible scenario. So if you do something really cool in your classes that you'd like to share with the world, for a moment I thought, oh my God, I'm going to share all this and then everyone's going to be as good a teacher as I am. But then I'm a faculty developer. That's what I do. That's my job. And that way more students will enjoy more classes, right? So I'm always happy to share ideas. And some of them might not work out for you, but it's good to have a lot of resources from different cultures and contexts so that people can benefit from them. Jasmine, this is the last time I'm going to mention you, I promise. I think with this pandemic, there was a lot of love, but there was also a lot of anger at what's happening to all of us in the world, a lot of anger about what's happening in terms of injustice against particular groups of people like Asian Americans and African Americans. I'm not even in America, but just seeing all of that happening. And there was discrimination against Asians here in Egypt as well. And thinking about that anger is something that can spark social justice labor, but it's love that sustains it. And I actually like Jasmine's quote more than I like the bell hooks quote in this. And this is a slide from Jasmine's keynote, actually. And so it's time for the debrief. And I hope I can give you a minute to ask me a question after we do the debrief. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, I actually need to get one. So just give me a second, and I'll give you a second to get one too. All right, are you with me? All right, you have a piece of paper. Could be a bit bigger than this because it's really small. All right. If you just fold it in half and then another half, and I second that Jasmine Roberts' keynote. All right. So now you've got this, and it's got a little thing in the middle over here, right? So I'm going to give you a minute and just draw a spiral in the middle, just a tight spiral. Just go very slowly. Like it's a Zen situation here. Just draw the spiral slowly and continuously. This is inspired by Linda Berry, by the way. Just look away from the screen, and I'm going to mute myself and be quiet for a minute as you do that. Okay. So I'm just truncating the activity. Usually I'd give you 2 minutes, but just for the interest of time. So I'm going to ask you to write things in the different quadrants. So the most important thing I learned today is, so we can start with that one. Could be anything you learned today, whether it was throughout the event or in some other part of your life. And you don't have to share these, by the way, with anyone. This is just for you, reflection for you. Okay, and then an action step I can take in the short term is, I think a lot of times we go to conferences and there's a lot of great ideas, but we might forget to take an action step after we've learned a great idea. So I want us to think about that. All right, one more. A challenge or question that remains for me is, all right, and the last one, after this conference, I am hopeful about. Okay. Hopefully you've all had time to answer all the questions, or at least those that came to your mind. If you're willing to share just one of the quadrants, like what came out for you, I'd love to read it. Most important things you've learned, or an action step, or something you're hopeful about, or a question or challenge that still remains for you. And I'll just read some of these out and then we'll stop. Action step, annotated syllabus. Alicia, great. Enjoy it. My students loved it this semester. Be aware of social atrophy. Hopeful about collaborating on our common challenges. Great. Much more to learn from others. Yes. You can hear a keynote of Jasmine. Yes, you can. Lots of keynotes of Jasmine. Sifting through resources. Great. That's an action step. Whoop. Ask how you can help others and show that you care. How you help students who don't ask for help when they need it. Yes, that's a great point. That is one thing, and we don't want people to disclose if they don't want to, right? Being cognizant of who's left out. Institutional barriers is for sure a challenge. Queenie saying, question or challenge that remains, how will Innovate 2022 look? Right, we don't know yet. Uncertainty is a big thing here, yeah? Awesome, thank you, Mike, bringing these activities into design tutorials. Grateful there's an increasing community who wants to transform. Annotated syllabus as well, yeah. It's awesome because it also teaches them to question the teacher, right? A little bit, like subverts sort of the power a little bit. Finding time, community with self, yes. Ongoing willingness to talk, caring educators here, yes. Structure, focus, leverage both online and in person, yes. Friendly, purposeful sessions in Zoom. Community of care. I love this. A lot of people are mentioning the community of educators here. Pulling learners anonymously and encourage psychological safety. Yes, I like that, Larry, very much. Sharing what you've learned today. That's awesome, yes. All right. I'm about to stop, but keep sharing if you'd like. And I am done. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to put a link in the chat. I ask people to give me feedback on my keynotes. Very few people actually do, but if you want to, you can do that. I try to keep in mind what people tell me and try to improve all the time. Thank you very much. And of course, stay in touch via Twitter, email, whatever you like. I hope I get to see you all again sometime.
Thank you so much, Maha. I hope that everybody really enjoyed this wrap up for our day and our keynote session. I'm just gonna do some quick closing remarks. I promise I won't keep you guys for more than a few minutes. I just wanna thank all of you again for attending. Our peak attendance today was 521 attendees, which is fantastic. For our first ever Innovate conference, I could not be more thrilled. So thank you all again for coming. As the chair for the first ever online Innovate conference, I was not given an easy task. There was months of planning, virtual meetings, plenty of times where I was stress eating candy and ice cream at my desk, among other things. But I did not do all of this hard work alone. There's an entire committee behind me who helped do all of this. And I just want to take a minute to thank each of them individually. To Queenie Chow, my co-chair, Amber Sherman, our programming chair, Joelle Nelson, Logistics Chair, Justin Troyer, Media Services Chair, Lita King, our Web and Design Chair, Kylie Pon, our Communications Chair, and Hillary Lorton, our communications co-chair. Thank you all so, so much. I know I've said it to you a million times this week, and I'm not going to stop saying it. You guys have all been so wonderful. Thank you also to our partners at the Academy of Teaching, especially Ben McCorkle and Laura Cotton, for helping plan some of our breakout sessions today. We also could not have done all of this without the two of you, so thank you again. I could probably make an entire session just thanking people, so I will try to stop there. Excuse me. I hope that everyone is able to leave here today with some tangible ways that you can innovate your teaching and learning throughout the rest of this year. I hope that it was a chance for you to step away from what's been a very hectic and busy year for everybody, no matter what you've been through. All of today's sessions have been recorded. Thank you again to all of our presenters and panelists as well. We'll be posting those recordings up soon, and we will share them out with everybody who was registered. Just one final thank you again to everybody for being here today. I hope that you all enjoyed the first ever virtual Innovate conference, and we hope to see you next year for the 2022 event. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.